Hello again. In today's video, I want to tell you why you should not read Harry Potter to study your target foreign language. Why you should not read Harry Potter to study a foreign language. Now, before we get into the meat of the discussion, I would like to say a short disclaimer because before everyone gets on this hate train, if you're reading Harry Potter to study your foreign language and you love it and you think it's super helpful, by all means keep doing it. I do not want to discourage anyone who's doing something that they enjoy, that they find works for them. If you're reading Harry Potter to study your foreign language and it works for you, please just keep doing it. I'm not here to discourage anyone. The point of my video is to express my opinion, which is just my opinion, about why I do not believe it is the best choice for foreign language learning. So if you were thinking about reading Harry Potter to study a foreign language, or you've heard about other people doing it, and maybe you thought, oh, I wonder if that's a good idea, I'm here to tell you why I don't think it's a good idea. But maybe, you're free to have your own opinion. So, without further ado, 4 reasons why I believe that Harry Potter is not a good way to study a foreign language. Number 1, and this is, I think, the biggest and maybe most important and obvious one, is that, Harry Potter was originally written in English. And if you're studying a foreign language, you should take the opportunity to read things that were originally written in that language. Now, this is not only because, you'll be reading it in the original and it'd be much more cool, right? But also because when you're studying a language, you're not just studying the language. You're also studying the culture. You're studying the places, the ideas, the people, the discourse that goes on in that language, in that kind of speech environment, right? So the reason that we study foreign languages is so we can have access to that. We don't study foreign languages just so we can reread and reacquaint ourselves with all the things that we already know from our native languages, do we? And so I think you're taking a great opportunity away from yourself if you read something which is originally in your native language by not picking something which was written by someone who is a native speaker of that language, who is native to the language, the area, the culture, and by reading them, even if it doesn't matter if it's fiction or non-fiction, you can acquaint yourself with a little bit with the culture, with the way of thinking, with how people talk and what they like to talk about. Now, if you read a book which is originally in the language that you're trying to study, that'll be much better than if you read something like Harry Potter, which is from a completely different language and a completely different culture. Of course, this doesn't apply if you're studying English. If you are studying English, then maybe Harry Potter is a great choice. So that was reason number 1. Reason number 2, and this is another big one, is that I often, as a student of foreign languages and a teacher of foreign languages, I see people reading Harry Potter, and the most commonly expressed sentiment I hear from people who are trying to read Harry Potter to study a foreign language is, geez, why is this so hard? These people they've read the book in English maybe multiple times, but then they go and try to read it in French, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, whatever, and they're thinking, why is this so darn hard? Don't I know this story? Why can't I understand anything? And I think this comes from the fact, people are studying people using Harry Potter as a foreign language study resource, I guess, because I think, first of all, people love Harry Potter, that's nice, but also because there's this idea, Harry Potter is something I read when I was 10 or 12 or preteen, whatever, and so it's got to be pretty easy, right? It's made for young adult readers, so it can't be that hard, right? Well, that's not entirely true. It's a lot harder than you think. I mean, yes, in the grand scheme of things, it's not like, some heavy reading, it's no Shakespeare or anything. However, the level of language used in Harry Potter, literature which is aimed at this demographic of, let's just say 12-year-olds, it's actually not so easy, especially if you're just getting started in your foreign language. I often see people who are just in their first week of studying a foreign language and they go to start to read Harry Potter. It will be way over your head. It is much more difficult than people think. By the time you have reached, let's say 10 years old, you have already had over 10,000 hours of experience. That's a very, very conservative estimate. You already have over 10,000 hours of experience with your native language. Now, how many hours have you studied your foreign language? Probably not nearly as much. So it's really hard to compare the level of comprehension you had maybe when you were 10 or 12. Maybe you thought, oh, my vocabulary couldn't have been that high. Well, it was as high as someone who has maybe had over 10,000 hours of quality language exposure. So it's really hard to think, if you haven't been studying your foreign language very long, you will be way out of your league. It'll be way too hard for you. So that's the second reason. Harry Potter is not easy reading. It is much more difficult than you would think. The third reason is, well, this is kind of maybe a silly reason, but nothing is ever as good in a translation as it is in the original. Translation, especially when it comes to literature, is a difficult art. I can speak from experience, someone who's translated a fair amount, that it's often so frustrating as a translator that you cannot convey the same feelings, the same nuances. Like, there's so much that gets lost in translation. And so if you really want to get the best Harry Potter experience, it's in English. I'm sorry. If you read it in Chinese, you might get something out of it. You'll get all of the main points of the story. But I think it's impossible for anything. Maybe there's some very, very rare exceptions, but everything will always be better in the original language. So whenever I read anything, if possible, I always try to read it in the original language. And I think if you want to read a book that will help you study your target language, it should be something which is originally written in the language. It'll be all the much better. And like I said in the first point, this is a little bit of why we learn a foreign language in the first place, so we can have access to this stuff which is typically only available in that language. And my last point is, well, I think that I've often found people who are reading Harry Potter to learn a foreign language typically never get to the end of the book. Why is that? It's actually not that motivating to read a book that you have already read before, in this case. Well, reading a book in a foreign language is already probably much more challenging and much more tiring than you can imagine if you've never done it. But on top of that, now imagine if you've taken away all of the excitement you might get from trying to know how the story progresses. Now, I've read books in foreign languages where it was often really hard for me to understand. In some pages, maybe I'm only getting really 50% of the words, but I could still follow enough of the story that I was really wanted to know what happened next in the story. I wanted to find, what's going to happen to this guy? How is the story going to develop? There's that sense of motivation you get from wanting to discover the path of the story, even if maybe a lot of the nuances are lost on you. But if you're reading a book where you already know the story, I imagine you're reading Harry Potter because you've already read it in English or whatever, maybe your native language, and so that's why you're reading it again to study a foreign language. It's just you don't have that same level of motivation. It's so much more motivating, especially as a foreign language learner, to be reading something when you're trying to figure out what is going on, what is happening, and that experience just isn't there when you're reading something where you already know the story. So there you have it. That's why I believe 4 reasons you should not study foreign languages with Harry Potter. You shouldn't use Harry Potter to study foreign languages. Yes, nothing against the books, nothing against reading things in translation if you like to do that. I think I made my points clear, and that's that. So if you want more languages, more videos about foreign language and languages in general, subscribe to the channel. Hope to see you again soon. Ciao.